To whom it may concern.
The following podcast may contain spoilers for the following films: The Dark Knight, M, Schindler's List, Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, Back to the Futures Part 1s through 3s. I put S's on the end to see that.
I like that.
And No Country for Old Men. Nose countries for old men's.
So they're saying this country is for noses?
And thank you for joining us on an incredibly different and very special episode of the Digital Drive-In Podcast. My name is Alex. As always, I'm joined by the villainous and evil Garrett DiNardo.
I thought you were say villainous like I was a female.
Oh my gosh.
No, but my name is Butt Nuggets.
Butt Nuggets. The villainous Butt Nuggets. And Garrett, why is this such a different and special episode?
Because rather than talking about one specific movie and talking about what we liked about it or even a director, we're going to talk about a specific subject, and that is great villains of cinema. As a car drives by.
So we've labeled down we've narrowed down a list to the 6 definitive. These are the best undisputed villains ever. Wow. Nobody can dispute them. Nobody can ever talk back to me or I will slap them hard.
That's fair.
Anyway, these are the best 6 villains ever, period. No, but these are our favorite, some of our favorites, because I mean, we narrowed it down to 6 for the sake of time, right?
Hey, I mean, I would say 6 notable, maybe?
Yeah.
Noteworthy.
We decided to pick 3 each for a total of 6. So, you know, who knows? Garrett might not like one of the villains that I picked. I might not have even seen a movie that Garrett picked. You never know what's going to happen on this sweet ass episode of Digital Drive-In, because that's how we do it down here. We like to mix it up. We like to make it unpredictable and fun and exciting and violent and gory.
That's how we roll.
That's how we roll in the hood.
Leprechaun 2, back in the hood.
And of course, off the top, I kind of already gave a spoiler warning for all the films we're going to be spoiling or talking about. So you can probably guess the villains from there, but if you forgot about it and don't want to rewind, we're going to keep it a secret. So you'll have to listen through all the way to find out which villains we picked for the bests of all time, for some of our favorites of all time, and why we picked them. Should we dive right into it?
Yes.
So first up, we're going to do my pick. And my first pick, Garrett,
yes,
is Heath Ledger's Joker. From
Never heard of
Nolan's The Dark Knight.
Sorry.
Now, for those of you unfamiliar, The Dark Knight is a Batman film. Came out in 2008, but it is more a crime thriller than it is your average superhero film. And in it was an incredible performance, the final, second last actually, performance by the great and late Heath Ledger, who played the clown prince of crime. I guess, what's your experience with The Dark Knight, Garrett? You like it very much?
I do.
I'm baiting the fuck out of this. Oh, you do, eh? Why'd you only rate it 4 stars on Letterboxd, motherfucker? I'm kidding.
4 stars doesn't mean bad.
Anything less than perfect means bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I picked Heath Ledger because I love the just pure anarchy of it. You know what I mean?
I do.
He is this wild card, loose cannon, unpredictable take on a classic character. It really changed the game for it. You know, a lot of people were used to maybe the Jack Nicholson or even the Mark Hamill incarnations of the Joker, which were more jokey than Heath Ledger's was. But Heath Ledger's Joker is fucking hilarious at the same time. It's just in a very different kind of humor. He has this very dark and insane allure to him that I just find so effortlessly charismatic and like ridiculous and wonderful to watch.
I mean, even in the movie, he says that he is an agent of chaos.
Yeah. Like I said, of course, Heath Ledger, the late Heath Ledger, because he unfortunately passed away shortly before the film came out, I believe, or was it right after it came out? I think it was right
No,
before.
yeah, it was before.
So he didn't even get to see the lasting,
You can say legacy. Yeah.
yeah, legacy that not only he left behind in all of his other films, Brokeback Mountain and A Knight's Tale and all of that, but he didn't get to see sort of the reaction people had to seeing his character fulfilled on screen, because there was a lot of turmoil kind of within the general public when he was announced as the Joker. We started this off like really deep and dark, didn't we? This is like a somber podcast right off the top.
It's the way it is. I mean, it's summer
Jesus, my other
villains.
one's about a Nazi and Holocaust anyway. You know, he, like I said, he didn't get to see like the legacy that it would leave behind. And
Or the fact that this was the first and so far only comic book film to have a major award, the Oscars.
yeah, and it will be. It will remain that, as much as Black Panther has been nominated for many of the, not even many. It's been nominated for one of the big awards, right? Best Picture.
Yeah, I would not put any
It's not
stupid
going to win that.
decision past the
I
Academy.
know, that's true. But the Joker is this infectious presence on screen. He is, in my opinion, worth rewatching The Dark Knight solely for. I think there are a lot of great elements in The Dark Knight. I would consider it a perfect film, but I think that the Joker is probably the most defining element of it. And I think that if you had anybody else in that role, it would not have been as great and as insane. And I think it's a very tough act to follow. You know, Jared Leto failed miserably at it. Whether
Right.
the writing let him down or not, his interpretation was not anywhere close to being Heath
Or even
Ledger.
the Dark Knight Rises kind of
Yeah,
faltered
yeah,
after.
that
You
is
know, and
true.
the interesting thing too is it wasn't like, not to give any shade to Christopher Nolan, but it's not like Christopher Nolan fully wrote this character to be this way and just hired Heath Ledger in to play him. Heath
No,
Ledger
yeah,
came to Christopher Nolan with an idea of, this is how I think the Joker
yeah,
could be
yeah,
portrayed. And Nolan's like, this is different than what I was thinking, but I think we could work with this. And
and
so
he
a
brought
lot
his
of it
own
had,
makeup.
right. Yeah. So a lot of it came from Ledger, not just his performance, but in the creation of how he wanted the character to be.
And there's the great improvisation scene that he has in the hospital where he
Mhm.
walks out and he's supposed to just like press the button to blow up the hospital and it explodes behind him, but it doesn't go off. So he turns around and like fiddles with the button a little bit and is like, what the fuck's going on? And then it blows up and he runs away. He
Yeah.
just was in full control, I think, of this character and knew exactly what not only he wanted the character to be, but I think what the character needed to be. He understood the script and the other characters in the movie so perfectly that he could build his character around them. You know, it pains me to wonder what he would be doing now if he was still around. You know, what performances do we miss out on him?
Oh, definitely.
Um, and he probably would have shown up in Dark Knight Rises. They talk a lot about like he would have had a quick scene when they're breaking him out of prison or something. But I think that for the most part, Nolan wanted this to be like the one and done. I don't think he had any intention of bringing back Joker altogether as like a full blown character again. But my favorite scene of
I've
his.
heard varying opinions of that, by the way.
Oh, really?
I actually, and I don't know how true it is, but the rumor not long before Dark Knight Rises came out on some of the forums was that he was going, like the intention was Ledger to play like a Hannibal Lecter type character in the next movie, where he would be in prison helping them catch.
See, and that would be kind of cool too.
Right.
But then I've also seen the story of like they were going to have during the breakout, Bane would be going through breaking out all of the villains or whatever. And then he would walk by the Joker in a cell, but he wouldn't break the Joker out.
Right.
Because he knew the Joker would fuck up his plan just by being the Joker.
Right. So I mean, it could have been like a Scarecrow type thing where he's just kind of like, he has a little moment in the movie.
That's
And
true,
that's it.
because the Scarecrow's in all three of the films.
Right. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. My favorite scene of the Jokers in The Dark Knight is the scene between him and Harvey Dent in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It starts, with the Joker. I gotta stop saying that. It starts with Joker coming into the room dressed up like the nurse,
Mm-hmm.
And he sits down and he takes off the face mask and
Hi.
yeah, hi. It's oh man, it's so funny. It's so funny. But in that scene, he talks about really that's the scene that kind of defines who his character is in the movie. Um, there's the line where he goes, "Do I really look like a guy with a plan?"
Mm-hmm.
Implying that he's kind of just making it up as he goes along, which he maybe is to an extent, but he's like, yeah, I'm like a dog chasing a car. I wouldn't know what to do with one. If I got it, I just do.
Yeah, I think that to me that's an important scene because it shows that he has the ability to do what he needs to.
It's a 2 minute.
He does what he needs to depending on the situation. And
Mm-hmm.
like he keeps changing how the story about how he got his scars depending on who it is that he's telling.
Yeah,
And I think him telling Harvey that he doesn't have a plan pushes Harvey into using the coin to make choices.
right. Well, it's because he says you got to just introduce a little anarchy. And then
Right.
he goes, because with anarchy, everything becomes chaos, and chaos is fair. That's what he says. Because Dent's a lawyer. He's one of the best lawyers in all of Gotham. He was a district attorney. He cares about what's right and what's wrong, but he cares about fairness. So chaos is fair.
I
But
think
in
what
doing that,
sold
he
me
plays Dent like a fiddle, right?
right. What sold me on Ledger's performance was the pencil trick. That whole scene.
Yes.
Ta-da!
uh man, that's yeah, it's gone. It's so good.
I always use
Oh.
the let's not blow things out of proportion.
Oh man, and just saying all these things makes me want to go back and rewatch the movie. Like I said, this movie for me, I rewatch it solely to see his performance because it is
Right.
just that incredible. I think
It
it
is.
is still the greatest villain ever put to a superhero film. And I think it's that because, and I'm going to go through it real quick. He's sort of the, is it antithesis? Is that how you say the word?
Antithesis.
Whatever. He's the opposite of Batman. He's he serves the same purpose almost as Batman, but is the other side of the coin. Yeah, Harvey Dent.
Mm-hmm.
Both he and Batman care about controlling Gotham in a way. Joker wants to do it through anarchy and chaos, while Batman wants to do it through justice. Um, Joker understands that that Batman doesn't kill. He knows he won't kill at all. But he uses that against
Yeah,
Batman.
saying he has to break his one rule.
You have to break your one rule because, Joker's going off like, I'm going to kill all of these people. I'm going to blow up both boats, even if they choose one or the other. You have to kill me. You have to break your one rule because he knows if Batman breaks his one rule, if he kills the Joker, it'll lead down a slippery and dark spiral to Batman essentially becoming the Joker and being ruthless, being a murderer, being a killer, being no different than the villains he tries to stop. But obviously, Batman's the good guy and he saves the day. But he outsmarts Batman at every turn, really. Obviously until the end. But even then, he doesn't outsmart the people on the boat, right?
Yeah, the
That's what he doesn't
criminals.
account for. He doesn't account for the criminals. He figured they were both going to blow each other up, or one of them was going to blow the other up. But he doesn't account for the fact of humanity of people because he's not a human, right? He doesn't understand that empathy.
Yeah, he's a sociopath.
He's a sociopath. And I think that never start with the head. The victim can't feel the next. See?
All your strength and nothing to use it on.
He is the perfect superhero villain. He has not been matched yet, in my opinion, in a superhero film. Thanos came incredibly close because he had well-defined motivations. You understood the character, and it was a great performance as well. But personally, I don't think any superhero villain, or very rarely any crime thriller villain, has lived up to Heath Ledger's The Joker. That's why I think he is one of the 6 best villains of all time, and absolutely one of my favorites.
Commissioner. So I thought for my villain, I should pick someone in a very modern film. So I picked one that's almost 90 years old and German. Because I'm sure everyone has seen this. No, it's It's the movie M, and it's directed by Fritz Lang, which you may know, Dr. Mabuse and Metropolis. I'm sure all the kids are talking about these movies. Um, it's Lang's first sound film.
Mhm.
So, I mean, one of the key ingredients to me, especially modern villainy, is the music, the soundtrack, right? Psycho, you have the reep, 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 reep. And then Jaws, you have the dun
Mhm.
dun. Even
Dun,
with
dun,
the
dun, dun, dun,
right,
dun.
Vader and the Empire have their own. That's a motif. Now, of course, that was used like way back in the day in operas, but M was one of the first films to have a reoccurring motif to show even off screen that the villain was around
Right.
because the serial killer that Peter Lorre played would whistle a tune. It was in the Hall of the Mountain King. Now I can't whistle it, and I'm sure most people would not even know what that song is. But if you were to go to like YouTube and look it up,
Is
you
it
could
not dun 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 dun?
that yeah, that might be it. I'm trying to remember now.
Anyway,
Yeah, you
I'll
can
preface
edit
this
that.
by saying I have not seen this movie.
Right.
I
And
was
so
going to watch it, but I didn't have the time, unfortunately.
it's going to be somewhat spoilery, of course, because I mean, first off,
Yeah.
he's the villain.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it
the
doesn't
whole
really matter.
yeah.
1931. It's my fault
Well,
for not having seen it.
it's a thriller, and the fact that there are I mean, you think about 1931 and like I don't think the code was around at this point, but like what you could get away with in movies isn't the same as you can get away with now. But this is a serial killer that murders children. And so nothing is actually shown on screen,
Hmm.
which actually makes it more powerful
Right.
because it's always like it will show like a mom with a dinner table and an empty space where her daughter is supposed to be after playing and she never comes home, or the villain buys a little girl a balloon and she has like a little ball with her, and later you
Right.
see the ball just bouncing by itself and the balloon stuck like up by some power lines, so you know the girl is gone now. And so there's all of these really interesting like horror type things that were kind of, if not started, popularized by this movie that shows the villain. And so it would be really easy to dehumanize that character and make everyone like root against this villain getting caught.
Right.
And what's interesting is in the film, the police are looking for him, but the criminals are also looking for him because with the police being out, so many things are stopping the criminal enterprises from running because they're like starting to break in. They think maybe this guy's like a career criminal or whatever. And so they're
Hmm.
starting to bust into places and breaking more people on the streets up trying to find the guy. And so now they have a vested interest in catching this guy as well, even though they're like terrible people. So it's like the movie's really building him up to be completely terrible. And I mean, he is. But what the really interesting part about the movie is it makes you feel sorry for him
Right.
because there's the scene where the criminals actually find him and they take him to like a kangaroo court, and they're asking him questions about stuff to find out to make sure he's the guy, and they're gonna like basically kill him while he's down there. And he starts saying that it's stuff that he can't control, and that um he wishes that he could stop, and he wishes there's something that could be done, but it's just a part of him and he can't do it. And it was interesting. He says like the criminals make a choice to do the things that they do because they could use their skills in legitimate means. Like someone might be really good with like lock picking, well they could become a locksmith, they could use that knowledge and that ability with their hands to turn that into making money. Or someone that's mechanically inclined that would break
Right.
into things don't have to do that in a bad villainous way. But the desires he has to take children and kill them, you can't turn that into anything good.
Hmm.
And that's a really interesting point. And it even brings up issues with social justice about
Right.
this guy knows he's doing what's wrong, but he can't stop it. So there's obviously something wrong inside of him. Maybe if he had some sort of corrective thing, maybe if they just took him away from society, that would be a thing. But like everyone ganging up on him and stringing him up and killing him, how does that make them any better than what he is?
Yeah. But then it kind of begs the question of like, if he can't turn his problem into something productive or useful, is he better off just being dead?
Right.
Otherwise, if he gets out, he's going to continue to do it.
Right. And that's the other thing too, is maybe you can't rehabilitate, and that's questions other movies has asked as well. Like, is putting someone in prison and having them in the population, does that make them worse? Or does
Right.
that actually help what it is? So there's all these things going on, and I was actually amazed when I saw it, like how the story and the characterization and what was going on was still relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably one of the reasons why the Criterion Collection decided to release it on Blu-ray, is because it still has those strong things and the ties to humanity and how that all works out. So I just thought it was a very interesting, like a completely unsympathetic villain that does horrendous things that you also feel sorry for and also makes a lot of great points.
Right. And it's interesting that it's from 1931 as well. To
Yeah,
have this kind of to deal with these kind of dark elements back then, I think it's maybe the precursor to it being a little more widely accepted in film like it is nowadays, to have these dark elements to it maybe.
right. And not just that, 1931 in Germany, not long before the Nazis took power,
Right.
and started doing the horrible atrocities that they did to humanity. Like the filmmakers then had a finger on the pulse of what would later happen
Right.
to huge groups of people.
No, there's a lot of child murder there too.
Right. And so the Nazis actually used this in propaganda against the Jews, saying we should kill everyone because they're terrible. And
Jeez.
it's like that's not even what the film itself was saying. So it's
Yeah,
just
but
it's interesting. Yeah.
you spread lies and it catches on. Well, it's certainly a movie that I want to check out. So
Yeah. I highly
it's near
highly
the
recommend.
top of my watch list now that we recommended it and with some of the interesting elements of it, and I'll certainly be sure to check it out as soon as I can.
And then you can let me know how terribly wrong I am.
You usually are.
Yeah, I don't know anything.
So interestingly, you were talking about German and you were talking about just moving on to the Nazis not very long after. And my next pick is a Nazi. Interestingly, that it worked out back to back like that. You did a nice little segue, is what I'm trying to say.
I got you.
But my next pick is a real life villain, somebody from reality. I wanted to pick sort of a true story element that was performed perfectly, in my opinion. And it is Eamon Goeth from Schindler's List, 1994, as played by Rafe Fiennes or Ralph Fiennes. What is it? It's Ralph Fiennes, isn't it? Rafe Fiennes?
I think originally it was Rafe, and then no one could pronounce it correctly, so he changed it to Ralph.
Portrayed by Ralph Fiennes. Or I'll just be calling him Fiennes throughout the rest of this.
Mr. Fines.
This is obviously, I don't have to have a discussion on the Holocaust. It
Thanks.
was terrible, horrible, disgusting atrocities, like you were saying. And we'll just put a full stop on that. There's no need to really go any deeper. But everybody talks about Hitler. And obviously, he was the master. Fuck, stop saying, he was the mastermind behind it all. But nobody talks about this guy, the sort of demonic and unhuman, again, kind of like the Joker, this unhuman presence in the absolute monster that he was. Obviously, he was the commandant or the leader of a concentration camp, one of the most lethal, brutal ones. But I think his name often either gets forgotten or doesn't get put at the same regards as Hitler's does. But in my opinion, having looked into the story in real life after watching the movie, I became very interested in the story. I read the book, looked up a lot of the stuff. He was well and truly this evil presence, and probably should be placed up along those Hitler lines.
Yeah, and
Probably like that.
Himmler, and Goebbels.
And Himmler and all of them, and Goeth, I think, is the one of the worst of the bunch as well. And Fine's performance in this film is so bone chilling. It's like I almost have a hard time remembering that it's Fiennes and that it's not just looking at the man himself, because you see him in something like the Grand Budapest Hotel and he's like whimsical and fun and cheery and all that, right? But then to go back and to see this, even when I watch this movie, I'm like, there's Ben Kingsley doing his thing. There's Liam Neeson doing his thing. I still don't see Fiennes in this role. I see him. I see Goeth in the man. You know, he has zero regard for the Jewish people's lives, as many of the Nazis did. I almost said many of the Hitlers. As many of the Nazis did. But there's that one scene where he's out on his balcony drunk and he's sniping people with his rifle just for fun, like for no reason. He just wants to do it, and he's just murdering people. And there's like a woman in his bed, and when the first gunshot goes off, it cuts back to her, and she goes like, "Oh, amen," and like rolls over as if he does this all the time.
Right.
It's terrible. Or the other scene where he drags out a worker into the streets to execute him, and his gun jams. So he like recocks it and the gun jams again, and he does it, and it jams again, and it jams again. So he's like, this gun's faulty, and he gives it to one of his like henchmen, I guess, or whatever. And he takes out another gun from his pocket, and it jams a bunch of times too. So I don't know why it did that. It's almost, but it happened, you know? It's like a true story, like I said. So if it's almost an act of God, but he relentlessly tries to brutalize this man, and he ends up just like beating him in the head with the gun and walking away frustrated with it. But it just goes to show this like brutal and, like I said, relentless demeanor that he has the entire film. And it's I think it's one of the most chilling performances of a real life person. There were survivors from the camp on set. I wish I could remember the camp's name. I think it's Glasgow. But there were survivors from the camp who couldn't be around Fiennes because he looked and acted and talked like the real Goeth too much. They couldn't be close to each other because it was, you know, triggering almost a PTSD from them. And if that's not a testament to how well he's portraying the character, I don't know what is. And eventually he was hung. And that video is on YouTube. You can watch it. I did, and I felt nothing when I watched it. He's the monster, though, not me. I'm not a monster. I'm not, I swear. But I don't know, Garrett. What are your thoughts on Schindler's List and then on this character, on Fiennes' performance as this evil person?
No, I agree with all the things you said. Extremely chilling. It's sickening. It's like having to get into the mind space of a person like that. Really shows the talent of an actor he is. I mean, later Fiennes played a serial killer in Red Dragon,
Right.
and then obviously he played the person of which we cannot speak their name.
Voldemort.
You did it.
Wizard Hitler.
So he's able to do that, but it's his performance definitely is something that is extremely memorable, and the way the film is shot is more like a documentary.
Yeah.
And with it kind of having that,
not cutting away, but wide shots, so you can almost feel every single second.
Right. And then it being in black and white makes it feel like it's that time period.
Yeah.
Even though we know things weren't black and white, but for anyone not living in the 30s and 40s, everything we've seen of it has been not in color. So it makes it feel like it's a period piece in that aspect. So,
and a sidebar on the black and white, the one scene where the little girl runs by with the red coat, so good. I think one of the best moments of colorization in film. just sort of accenting the girl,
Right.
the innocence, the the girl that's too young to understand what's happening but is trapped very much in the center of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a really good way of forcing your eye to see something specific that Spielberg was wanting to show
Mhm.
in the scene, and so that you recognize that it's the same person later,
Right.
you know. So yeah, all that stuff. It's
And while it is described in the book and the stories that she did have a red coat, that
right.
Schindler did make note of it, he did see it from afar. I think it's, like you said, back then wasn't black and white in real life. So I think it was a very beautiful, almost directorial move from Spielberg to have that contrast in color.
It's certainly not a feel good movie that you want to watch again and again for that.
No, I've only seen it once, and then because I just couldn't watch it again. It's one of the most draining film experiences. Um, it's, I think, the only film that I have stopped myself. I stopped halfway through and like went outside and got fresh air and then came back in because it was just like relentless. It does not stop being just emotionally draining until the credits roll, and even then it's still just powerful as all hell.
Have you ever seen Showa?
No.
Need to check that out.
Okay. I'm gonna put it on the list then.
SHOAH.
Okay. I just wrote it down. But if that's about it for me on Go With. I guess in closing, since he was my pick, like I wanted to pick, like I said, a true story person, like an adaptation of a character of a person. I mean,
Hmm.
I wanted to, and there aren't very many true story films that have like a true villain like this. You
Right.
could pick like Charlie Chaplin's Hitler or whatever, like, but Hitler is as a villain. Like if I picked that, that's kind of a cop out, I think. But then to pick something like this, which is so indistinguishable from the real person, I thought was a really great way to show history and to sort of pay respects to those lost in that time, and to almost have a foreboding warning that there is very much evil in our world, and that if, I don't want to say if we're not careful, it'll happen again, but these people most certainly still exist.
Yeah, I mean, it already has happened again.
That is true. Yeah.
I mean, you have well, there's not a history lesson. It was like Cambodia had all that stuff. You had the
Yep.
internment camps for the
Rwanda.
Japanese. You yeah, there's oh shoot, why can't I not think? Is it not Hungarian? Fuck. Anyway, there was another one that's like in the 60s.
Hmm.
It happened. But anyway,
But history repeats itself over and over and
yeah,
over
it's
again.
circular.
And then if we aren't careful, we'll have something like this happen again. And I think this was almost Spielberg's way of saying, this tragedy, we must do our utmost to assure it never happens,
Right.
to
I
make sure
mean,
nothing like this ever happens to anybody anywhere ever
you
again.
know, that's the crazy thing is the amount of people killed in the camps. Not. I mean, again, this doesn't even have to be on the thing.
Well,
The amount of people killed in the camps doesn't match the amount of people that Stalin killed of his own in
yeah,
Russia.
yeah.
That's not to lessen the effect because the Holocaust obviously was a horrible, terrible thing that actually happened. But
It's
numbers
not.
wise, there
It's
have
it's almost not unique in a way.
right. It
This
is.
kind of evil is everywhere.
Yeah. So it's not actually inhuman, and people looking at it saying a human wouldn't do that. Well, guess what? Humans have done
Right,
it and
right.
are doing it.
It's terrible and horrible, and I picked two downer notes in a row. And
Well, they're
spoiler warning,
villains,
my third one will be. But you can have fun villains too.
sure, but they're not realistic.
That's true. That's true. And like I said, when you pick someone from real life like this, I thought I'd go big or go home, and I didn't want to pick the cliched Hitler, so I picked someone who was just as
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. I don't
And
blame you.
I'm sure, like, we'll say this to all the actors that are on this list, but again, mad props to Fiennes, because I often forget he's in the movie because I don't see him. I just see Goeth.
So I couldn't go through an entire list without at least mentioning Kubrick.
I was surprised it wasn't somebody else, but
Yeah. I can't imagine who. I wasn't going to bring it up, but
oh, I mean, I didn't say the name, but
right. So my pick, the film is Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. It's from 1964, another black and white film.
I have seen this one,
You have seen it.
although I only watched it last week.
So the interesting thing, like most people would probably pick Doctor Strangelove because he's the title character and he's obviously has ties to Nazis. But I
Right.
picked Jack D. Ripper,
Mm-hmm.
who's played by Sterling Hayden. What's interesting in a lot of these types of like take over the world films, the bad guy never wins.
Right.
Spoiler alert, this bad guy wins.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly what he wanted to accomplish happened,
Yeah.
even though it shouldn't have been that way, and they had the fail safes. But it's like everything, and in fact, there's even a book or a movie based around this book called Failsafe. It's interesting to me because, like I said, this was made in 1964, but literally you could swap out people in American politics at this very second, and it would not change a goddamn thing about the story.
You are absolutely right. Absolutely right. When I watched this last week, it was for the first time, I was astounded at how absolutely relevant it was today. More so than almost anything I've seen.
Yeah. I mean, and it being written as a comedy because of how outlandish it is actually drives the point home harder because you
Mm-hmm.
can't miss the point.
And I guess we'll preface by saying like the next 20 minutes are going to be semi politically charged because my next pick is also politically charged.
Sure. Well, and I don't even have to like go into specifics, but it's just the fact
I will
that
be.
Jack D. Ripper, as played by Sterling Hayden, he's Air Force Brigadier General
Mhm.
that's at the Air Force base, and he thinks that there's this communist plot to insert things into the drinking water of Americans, and their precious bodily fluids are being corrupted, and he found this out during the act of lovemaking. So, I mean, if you were to just change that to be anti-vaxxer or any of these things, the fake news or Russians controlling the political climate of who gets elected, like it fits everything into this guy's crazy rants. But the thing is, he's not an Alex Jones that's just on the radio.
Right.
He has instituted this thing where all the planes get sent a message saying that nuclear holocaust is happening, and so you're supposed to go and do strike targets on specific Russian spots, and he
Mhm.
did it in such a way to where the only way they could get turned around is if they have this 3 digit